Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war, a news update, a bit of an analysis on, now the dust has settled, what Trump said yesterday in his Mark Rutte, Secretary General of NATO, chat in the Oval Office. The long-awaited announcements over, well, I say long-awaited, it was over the weekend that we were waiting for it after it was announced that Trump announced by himself that he was going to say something really big on Monday. And when it came to it, I don't know if it was as groundbreaking as I was hoping. I had a live stream last night with Greg Terry and Prof. Gerdes, and both of them were quite, not ecstatic, but they were really happy with what they saw was a bit of a U-turn of Trump, and that there would be all of this weaponry going to Ukraine. I've had a bit of time to think about it, and although I was somewhat pleased, there were loads of caveats, and now those caveats, I think, hold a lot more sway. I'm less impressed this morning than I was last night. So let's go through the TLDR of this, the biggest success of yesterday for, as far as Ukraine is concerned, it is Trump's shift in rhetoric and tone. And indeed, that's actually kind of what the main analyses are saying today. This is from The Guardian. Analysis from Dan Saber that Trump quotes, this is the title of the article, Trump's hazy Ukraine arms announcement marks a tonal U-turn. What you get from that is, it's low on the details, but it is a shift in his kind of rhetoric and position. And that is good. That's really good news. He's seems to be just more aligned to Ukraine, at least rhetorically, than he was previously. Excellent stuff. But when it comes to the details, it's a little bit underwhelming. Essentially, the US has just agreed to sell Europe a load of stuff. That's kind of like me, Harry's drowning in the pond. He's drowning. And I say to someone else just walking by, oh, you can go and buy a ring for him down there. If you go and buy a ring for him, by the way, that I get a bit of profits from the shop that sells that. You can go and buy a ring down there. I'll help you buy that. As in, by help you, I mean, I'll say you can and it's over there. So then passerby goes and buys a ring and saves the drowning person. And I go, yeah, check me out. Check me out. I said you could buy a ring. Well done. So here, I mean, it's almost slightly worse. It's like, the US profits from this assistance that they are not giving. So there is no assistance being given by the United States as far as we can work out at the moment. There is $10 billion worth of equipment that the US is selling to supporters of Ukraine. And the supporters of Ukraine are the ones that need to be congratulated here for stumping up the cash to buy the equipment on behalf of Ukraine. It should be Germany and Norway that are getting applauded. It's not Trump. Trump should not be getting a congratulation for this, other than, well done, you've changed your tone on Ukraine that doesn't make you look like a complete bastard. I guess, well done. So I have changed a bit, I mean, it's good. Like, objectively, for Ukraine, they're in a better position today than they were 2 days ago. Okay? They are going to get some weaponry. Actually, there could be a bit of a problem with how quickly they get that weapon. We'll come on to that in a second. So let's look at the beginning of this article. For those looking for details, Donald Trump's rambling half-hour press conference in the Oval Office with the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte offered only a handful of clues. The US will sell weapons to Ukraine, the president said, with other NATO countries paying the bill, but otherwise specifics were scant. No sums of money were mentioned, making it hard to calibrate how much of a difference the proposed weapon supply would make to Kyiv. Details were light on what new munitions would be supplied through, though Trump mentioned complete Patriot missile systems, and Rutte added there would be missiles and ammunition too. It is hard to know precisely what amount of military purchases would make a difference and perhaps force Vladimir Putin to consider calling for a ceasefire, but in the crudest sense, any package worth more than $10 billion would certainly send a signal to Moscow when considered in light of the $67 billion previously given by Trump's predecessor Joe Biden to Ukraine over nearly 3 years. Okay, the difference is given, and this isn't $350 billion, as Trump keeps saying. So there was one specific threat to Moscow. Trump did promise to levy a 100% tariff on Russia if Putin did not agree a deal to halt the fighting within 50 days. Although the president's previous record on levying and dropping tariffs has been so confusing that it cannot be presumed that this will come to pass if Russia does not comply. But make no mistake, tonally, Trump's statements on Monday amount to a significant moment. Although the president did not sound annoyed or angry with Putin when he said, "We're very unhappy, I am with Russia," there was a clear measure of exasperation with his Russian counterpart. Okay, so as I said last night in various places, I think Trump really wants a Nobel Peace Prize. He feels that Putin is frustrating him on that account. And so there's something personal about this. And he's annoyed with Putin because he's not going to get his Nobel Peace Prize in any hurry. He's finally realized 6 months too late that Putin shouldn't be trusted. I mean, well done for finally realizing what we all knew 6 months ago. I mean, literally all of us watching this video knew that 6 months ago. All of us. We knew that 3 freaking years ago. So well done, Trump, for coming round. Okay, so this is a tonal shift. But there's a bunch of other things to consider here. Now, one of the main tools that he talked about last night was this, the tariffs and sanctions package, the sanctions package he could put on Russia if they haven't come to the table, haven't achieved some kind of deal within 50 days. We might ask why 50 days was the number. It could be that he wanted to ensure that the bill passes through Senate, the Richard Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham bill, and that's what I was suggesting last night. But what we find out since then is pretty staggering, possibly. Now, this bill was touted as the big bill to shift Russia in terms of coming to the table. So as an example, this is a couple of days ago, senators tout Russia's sanctions bill as sledgehammer for Trump to end the war in Ukraine. So 2 days ago, this was going to be the sledgehammer. Then Trump announces these sanctions that appear to be derived from this. That power seems to be derived from this bill, right? And so I was then suggesting, well, the time frame, that 50 days could be because the bill needs to go through the Senate, then it needs to go to the House of Representatives, they might tinker with it, so it'll then go back to the Senate, and that takes some time. So that's your 50 days type excuse. But then we hear just today that the Senate has paused the Russia sanctions bill after Trump promises to act alone. So it seems that Trump's threats against Russia, 50 days or this will happen, that is a unilateral threat rather than a threat to use the bill that is yet to pass, right? So because Trump has made that unilateral threat, it seems that John Thune, the Senate Majority Speaker, is going to pause the bill. We don't need to do the bill now that Trump's just made some fairly vague threats in the Oval Office. So the US Senate has delayed moving forward the major sanctions bill against Russia and its trading partners after President Donald Trump said he is ready to take action on his own. Senate Republican leader John Thune told Politico that Trump appears willing to handle part of the effort without Congress. Quote, "It sounds like right now the president is going to attempt to do some of this on his own," Thune told reporters. "If at some point the president concludes that it makes sense and adds value and leverage that he needs in those negotiations to move the bill, then we'll do it. We'll be ready to go. We will be ready to go." On Monday, Trump delivered a long-awaited statement on Russia. He said that if no ceasefire deal is reached in Ukraine within 50 days, the US will impose 100% tariffs on Russian imports and those from countries helping Moscow economically. quote, we're going to do secondary tariffs if we don't have a Russia-Ukraine peace deal within 50 days, Trump said during a meeting on Monday with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Secondary tariffs are very, very powerful. Trump also announced that the United States and other NATO nations have agreed on new arms shipments to Ukraine, and other NATO members are expected, with other NATO members expected to cover the cost. Thune said Trump's latest remarks suggest that the Senate may no longer need to pass the sanctions package. He added that lawmakers will continue working with the White House and the House of Representatives to coordinate strategy. Quote, we're going to try as best we can to coordinate strategies with the White House, obviously with the House, Thune said. So we will have it ready to go at a minute's notice. The bill, introduced by Republican Senator Lindsey Graham and Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal, calls for 500% tariffs on imports from countries that continue to buy Russian oil, gas or uranium, including China, India and Brazil. It had gained strong support in the Senate, with 85 members backing it. Graham and Blumenthal welcomed Trump's warning, but said tariffs targeting Russia's key trading partners such as China, India and Brazil are still the most powerful tool to end the war. Quote, China, India and Brazil prop up Putin's war machine by purchasing cheap Russian oil and gas, the senators said. So we've got this situation where now that big bill is being essentially paused because Trump's made some vague unilateral threat against Russia. He's then selling $10 billion worth of kit to the Europeans without too much detail about what that kit is. There was talk about 17 Patriots. Well, actually, that appears to be 2 to 3 Patriot batteries that are, who knows exactly where they're coming from. There's just a lack of knowledge. It may well be that the Germans are going to provide them from their own stocks and then order those from the US. So again, well done, Germany. And, congratulating the US for selling Patriot systems to Germany for their own use is kind of less impressive, isn't it? So the analyst here says, so the Senate bill is dead. As I said all along, the president already had powers to invoke sanctions. All this does is tweak what's available. Now it's not even considered necessary. So what was the point? Republicans have no idea what they're doing. That's what the analyst thinks. So US Senate has suspended consideration of the sanctions package on 500% duties against Russian partners after Trump's threats. That's Politico there. Then we hear that there are no Patriots potentially coming anytime soon. Germany says air defense for Ukraine will be delayed despite Trump's promises. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius has announced that the new Patriot systems Berlin plans to purchase from the US for Ukraine will not arrive in the coming months. He made this statement after meeting with US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Germany is pledged to provide Ukraine with 2 batteries, but the delivery of the first one will take months. Meanwhile, Donald Trump had previously assured that the first Patriots would start arriving later today and would be in place within a few days to defend Ukrainian cities from Russian bombs. And that's coming from Nexter. Goodness me, who knows now when these will arrive. NATO countries, according to Der Spiegel, a German publication, will quickly deliver American weapons from their own stocks to Ukraine. So it could now be that the stocks are coming from German stocks, and then the month or two that it'll take to get those systems from the US might then replace the ones given by Germany. And then they will go to the US to buy them to replenish their depleted arsenals. Germany, Finland, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Britain, the Netherlands and Canada will join the first wave of deliveries. So it looks like a bunch of countries are coming together to acquire this equipment. So Trump has changed his tune on Zelensky, says Politico, acknowledging the courage of Ukrainians despite previously criticizing him for his lack of gratitude. The reason for the increased aid to Ukraine was frustration with Putin and Russia's particularly brutal and indiscriminate attacks. And there are some people saying that because it was referenced in the conversation that Melania Trump might have something to do with it, because she kept correcting Trump when he would come back after phone calls with Putin saying that was a lovely phone call, and she would say, yeah, but they've just bombed Kiev. So who knows? Now, Kaja Kallas, who's a lot more forthright with her words, has said this on Trump's deadline for Putin. On the one hand, it's very positive that President Trump is taking a firm stance on Russia. On the other hand, 50 days is a very long time if we see that they are killing innocent civilians. Yeah. Why such a delay? So the Kiev mayor, that would be Vitali Klitschko, questioned Trump's 50-day deadline to Russia. Quote, on the one hand, I'm happy about the wave of support from the US, Kiev Mayor Vitali Klitschko said. But on the other hand, I do not understand why Kremlin leader Vladimir Putin is being given 50 days. That looks like exactly the same words as Kaja Kallas. So I don't know if there's a bit of confusion as to who said that. But either way, that's pretty much spot on. Now, Phillips O'Brien, the war historian who has a keen interest in the Ukraine conflict, said just posted on a Trump announcement a real mixed bag and hardly the awesome package for Ukraine that had been promised. Trump gives Putin sanctions protection for 50 days and promises Ukraine defensive weapons. It's saying to Putin, keep doing what you're doing. Worth noting that Putin told Trump a little while ago that Russia's plans were to keep up the offensive for the next 2 months, exactly the time period, almost exactly the period Trump is making sure, that they will not get sanctioned. So Putin said, I'm going to be keeping this up for 2 months. Then Trump says, okay, I'll effectively give you 2 months before we put sanctions on. Now, Mark Rutte has gone on Fox News and has waxed lyrical about how wonderful Trump is. And as Defamon says, Rutte is really taking one for the team. He should get a medal.
How is President Trump seen around the world by world leaders you deal with?
I think he is very well respected. And I thought in The Hague, at the summit, 31 leaders. So the 32nd, of course, is the US. In itself, by the way, bigger than all the other 31 combined. That is how powerful this country is and this nation is in your military. But the other 31 leaders really recognizing, hey, this is somebody who is absolutely clear what he wants to achieve, is committed to NATO, but he is extremely frustrated about the fact that we were not paying up, and now we are paying up. And therefore, this commitment to NATO is ironclad.
You raised some eyebrows when you used the term daddy.
Yeah, I probably should have said father or the grown up in the room. But you know, this is the fun part about President Trump. He came back to the White House and immediately there was this video released, Daddy is home. Yeah. And you've seen the t-shirts with Daddy on it.
So he laughed about it.
He laughs about it. And that is why I like him so much, because he has that humor and that light touch. And he's a great man.
Mr. Secretary General, thanks for the time.
Thank you so much.
Now, actually, what Aaron Rupert here says isn't quite the correct representation of what Mark Rutte said. How is President Trump seen around the world by leaders you deal with? I think he's very well respected, he said, by the NATO members there, which is not the same as saying he's a great man. He personally, at the end, said he's a great man. That's Rutte saying that, not those other leaders. I think he was very careful not to overplay what I guess other NATO member states think of Trump, because actually around the world he's not really well respected. So Rutte is having to do the tough job of buttering Trump up in public, and it's pretty cringe. In fact, it's a bit inappropriate, this statement. So everybody getting mad at Rutte doesn't understand his job. His job is to there's a bit of expletives here and a bit inappropriate, but essentially his job is to butter Trump up as much as it's needed to keep the United States invested in NATO and Ukraine. Despite powerful people actively working against him, he is doing it regardless of his optics. So, Rutte taking one for the team there in terms of being really obsequious and fawning over Trump. Now, I think we can get a good understanding of how underwhelming the package or the announcements were yesterday, because Dmitry Medvedev has come out and said Trump issued a theatrical ultimatum to the Kremlin. The world shuddered, expecting the consequences. Belligerent Europe was disappointed. Russia didn't care. And actually, you had a spike in the Moscow Stock Exchange, because I think they were expecting it to be much worse than it was. You've got people like Medvedev coming out and saying, yeah, not really bothered. No change from the Russians. This has actually gone down pretty well in Russia. Just essentially selling a bunch of Patriot systems to allies of Ukraine. Now, there might be some other stuff around the sides that we're just not aware of yet. There was mention of other missiles and artillery ammunition, but nothing particularly offensive. I was hoping that at least there'll be some presidential drawdown authority released, but it could be that would have been too controversial given the Epstein files catastrophe in the Trump administration that means that if they are giving any stuff away from American stocks and American money, if American money is involved in helping Ukraine, then that will annoy the MAGA support too much, because they're already really angry, saying that Trump has become deep state with regard to the cover-up of the Epstein files. And if they'd gone to help Ukraine, that would have been going back on two things as far as the MAGA Republicans were concerned, and that would be too much. So there might be a little bit of political shenanigans going on here with how the US is playing it, how Trump is playing it. It could be that more stuff might come further down the line as the Epstein stuff quietens down or whatever. But yeah, Trump has subsequently said he's disappointed but not done with Putin. He said he believed a deal with Moscow had been close on 4 separate occasions. I don't believe that for a second. I mean, he might believe it. I don't disbelieve that he believes it. I disbelieve that it was actually objectively close. Washington Post then comes out today with this claim. During one of the conversations between Zelensky and Trump had wondered why Ukraine had not yet struck Moscow. Zelensky replied, "We can if you give us weapons." So Trump playing with this idea of sending missiles, giving missiles to Ukraine to strike Moscow, which is incredible given kind of where the appeasement positioning of Trump had previously been. I don't know that he particularly understands like escalation management and stuff like that. I don't think he thinks too deeply about these things. It's like, well, you know, why don't you, they're hitting Kiev, why don't you blow up parts of Moscow? Well, yeah, we would if we could. We aren't, so we can't. Give us some missiles. And he's like, yeah, all right. And that's probably where you start hearing the rumors about the JASSM cruise missiles maybe going to Ukraine that have been thrown around for the last few days. Trump said that Ukraine should put more pressure on Putin. So Trump saying, hey, you should pressure Putin more with strikes on Moscow, not only in Moscow, but also in St. Petersburg. And then when it comes to it yesterday, it just seems to be a case of selling Patriot. So Igor Sushko then does a quote here. He excerpts it. So Trump also considered sending Tomahawk cruise missiles. Sorry, not the JASSM. JASSMs have less of a range than Tomahawks, haven't they? Trump also considered sending Tomahawk cruise missiles, the same weapons fired against Iranian targets last month. If fired from Ukraine, these could hit Moscow and St. Petersburg, and they were included in discussion as late as Friday. But the Tomahawks were off the delivery list for now, I'm told. They could be deployed later if Trump wants even more leverage. Trump's determination to squeeze Putin was conveyed in a conversation last week with Ukrainian President Zelensky. A source told me Trump asked Zelensky why he didn't hit Moscow. Quote, "We can if you give us a weapon," Zelensky said. Trump said Ukraine needed to put more pressure on Putin, not just Moscow, but St. Petersburg too. Okay. So that's pretty fascinating stuff. So now you're hearing people, saying Trump considered sending Tomahawk missiles, but for now they're off the list. The analyst says in his overview, the Russians were universally relieved that the US NATO announcement appeared to amount to not a lot. Tariffs on Russia are essentially meaningless. Tariffs that might be secondaries on those buying Russian oil, particularly will first have to be enacted, then seen to take effect, which, given Trump's time frame of 50 days, add the oil market order to delivery time, is easily 100 plus days away. As a Russian Foreign Ministry statement put it yesterday, quote, "A lot can happen in 50 days. His implication was that Trump is so inconsistent, this whole thing could just go away. Yet, in a revealing moment, Trump said that it goes back to a talk to Melania at night, tells her he spoke to Putin in a nice phone call. She then says, well, they just hit another Ukrainian city. By the 4th time, he said, you realize that what he says is meaningless. When you read through many histories, says the analyst, it's shocking how many minimal passing conversations actually move mountains that can change global events. How a revealing aside can punch through where 1,000 politicians and speeches never do. The question is, what weapons will be sent? From Moscow's perspective, a couple of Patriot batteries that won't be used against drones is irrelevant, although it does tighten the Ukrainian air defense against almost non-existent air incursions deep inside the country, perhaps forcing some of the glide bombers further back. The real question is, what long-range missiles is the US willing to provide? there's only one thing that would make me think Ukraine could change the war with. The one thing with range and accuracy that would evade defences: ground launched cruise missiles on a Typhoon system launcher. Tomahawks have a range of 1,600 kilometres, putting the whole drone making operation in range. That's something the Russians are bothered about, and they will rail against it hard and fast once they find out. It doesn't matter to them that they have been using such weapons against Ukraine, an edge they have had since day one, when they used hundreds in the initial attack. Russia will declare it as escalatory and a NATO attack, but it's no red line no matter the language they use. Every time they rub Trump's nose in the shite, Putin regurgitates to keep him quiet. It's going to keep him on Ukraine's side a while longer because Trump's ego is bruised from being taken advantage of. Perhaps what is most concerning, and the Russians will take delight in because it's been decades-long Russian ambition, is the decoupling of Europe from the US. This is Europe buying US kit to replace weapons they send to Ukraine. The US is only involved in a policy and sanctions way. Yet it's a hollow victory now, that decoupling. A quiescent Europe decoupled is one thing, easily duped by Russia, but nowadays that's the exact opposite of where Europe is. A partial decoupling has begun, but it's the worst of all worlds for Moscow. Putin's strategic plan, his entire strategic view, was based on rapid war and quick victory. The system he created made that impossible, a full-scale kleptocracy that ruined the military and still does. He only now realizes that, and no ideals, just greed spurred this war. That and a legacy hunt. In Moscow, the mood is meh. Until it happens, it's meaningless. A few patriots won't change their calculations. Typhoon and Tomahawk, though, they would absolutely be a game changer, and they know it. So hope springs eternal, I guess, that there could be those weapons. They're not off the table completely, but the US don't seem to have been up for giving the Ukrainians that now. According to US media reports, this is coming from Visioner, Ukraine may be granted permission to use the remaining stockpile of MGM-140 ATACMS ballistic missiles at their maximum range, which means they could strike targets of up to 300 kilometers deep into Russian territory. The $10 billion military aid package, which isn't really an aid package, it's like the amount of weaponry that the US is going to sell, which leading EU countries will purchase from the United States in order to supply Ukraine with critical weapons, will also include additional quantities of MGM-140 ATACMS ballistic missiles. Now, I don't know the provenance of that claim, right? But that would be brilliant. Like, if you do start getting a load of ATACMS, then you start getting onto offensive weapons. So there is some wiggle room for Ukraine here in terms of, like, the declaration's been so vague that it could be that Europe has been able to buy a bunch of weapons from the United States that will add some potency to the Ukrainians offensively. I mean, all Ukraine's offense is defense. You got to remember that. I mean, the whole war is a defensive battle. But so my position is somewhat underwhelmed by this. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Ryabkov commented on Trump's new plan, stating that Moscow wants Washington and NATO to treat Russia's position with the utmost seriousness. Medvedev just saying Russia doesn't care. So I would agree this is all a bit underwhelming, or I'd conclude it's all a bit underwhelming unless the US does enable Europe to buy some pretty cool stuff outside of the Patriots. I mean, it's all great that the Ukraine are going to get hold of this stuff, but the congratulations need to go to the Europeans who have bought this stuff. You know, you don't congratulate the shop. You know, when you get a Christmas present, right? This is probably, I hope this is a good analogy. When I get a Christmas present, my missus gives me a Christmas present and I open it up and, you know, she's bought something from, I don't know, a shop in my local village. Forget me not. I don't open it up and go, first thing and go, oh, well done, forget me not. Oh, well done. That's a lovely present that they've sold. Oh, well done, forget me not. And just like my missus is sitting there going, hang on, I chose that for you. I bought it for you. I've wrapped it up and given it to you. And you're thanking the freaking shop I bought it from. What are you doing, you idiot? Yeah, that's skewed. That is wrong. So we need to be careful about who is behind all this. Yes, Trump has allowed the stuff to be sold, but he'd be in a lot of trouble with Lockheed Martin and Raytheon if he didn't. Well done to Europe for buying this stuff and striving to get it to Ukraine. Let's hope there's a range of weaponry on there, and let's hope that this is more than just a tonal shift for Trump, that actually it's a stepping stone to further decisions that support Ukraine. I'm hopeful it might be, but that's yet to be seen, and we know that he's used to being very, very inconsistent, and that's kind of what the Guardian article was saying. It's also worth seeing a few sort of updates going on today too. Yeah, so Kallas welcomes a US military deal with NATO, hopes that Russia's sanctions will be adopted today or tomorrow. But of course, 50 days is a very long way away. We are very, very close. It is good signs that we see from the United States that they have also realized that Russia does not really want peace. So in order to have peace, we need to support Ukraine, and we need to put the pressure on Russia. So that's Kaja Kallas's position. The EU sanctions need to take momentum from Trump's decision forward, push Russia more, says a Danish minister there. Good to see Europe and US converge on an approach to Russia, says Dutch foreign minister. So this is about the tonal shift being really, really important. What else? Interesting. Brexit sloppy, but getting straightened out by Starmer, says Trump. Trump also asked about his views on Britain, saying the implementation of Brexit has been on the sloppy side, but I think it's getting straightened out. I really like the Prime Minister a lot, even though he's a Liberal, he said of Keir Starmer. So there you go. Interesting. But so those are my thoughts broadly on the announcement from yesterday. Let me know what you think. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.